This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
It's you. Hello. Lovely to see you again. Welcome to the Possibility Club. We're looking at practical bravery in every corner we can find it. And today's episode dives into the heart of large-scale social enterprise, exploring the intersection of health inequality and global innovation. My guest in this episode has been at the forefront of transforming lives through visionary healthcare strategies. With over 2 decades of experience in international development, now leading an organisation that has transformed the vision of over 10 million people. She's unlocked billions in household income potential as people start to see clearly again where maybe poor eyesight was impeding ability to work, look after their family. So how is it possible to mastermind commercially earned revenue alongside philanthropy in a growing business, nurturing a purpose-driven enterprise centred around social impact at scale in turbulent times? Well, let's find out. My guest, she has a master's degree in emerging market economics and Southeast Asia studies from Johns Hopkins University and a rich background at the Council on Foreign Relations. There's not much she doesn't know about how we begin to unravel the complexities of creating global health equity and sustainable change. I'm Richard Freeman. This is the Possibility Club. And my very special guest this week is the Chief Executive of VisionSpring, Ella Gudwin. Hello. This is the Possibility Club. Welcome to another thrilling episode with me, Richard Freeman, talking to a changemaker, somebody with a mission, somebody with a vision for something that's going to be transformative, but isn't just sitting there dreaming, is rolling their sleeves up and doing. And following our theme of practical bravery, I think today's guest embodies that in so many ways. I'm very delighted to be joined by Ella Gudwin from VisionSpring. Now, we're not even on the same continent, are we, Ella? So where are you calling in from today? I know it's my late afternoon and it's your morning.
I'm in New York at present.
There's no finer place to be. I spent a lovely week in New York a couple of months ago and I miss it like hell. I'm in central London in the atrium of the Royal Opera House, having just had a meeting here. So apologies if there's any background noise on my end, but we're both living our best life. It's all good.
We are.
Let's start with what led you to an organisation revolutionising the kind of role of eye care, but in a way that's very, very different to what people might have been used to in a high street glasses retailer. What's VisionSpring trying to do, and why did you want to do it?
What people might not realize is that there are 1 billion people in the world who do not have the eyeglasses they need to see, to learn and achieve in school, to maintain their livelihoods and their productivity, to be safe on the roads as drivers, and to just sustain overall well-being. We talk about the wonder of clear vision, and eyeglasses are a 700-year-old technology that have failed to diffuse to the low-income segment. They have been remarkably stuck as a luxury item, as a product for the learned and the elite. And even though glasses can now be radically affordable from a production standpoint of view, they have not diffused to the low-income segment. So VisionSpring was established in 2001 as a social enterprise, recognizing that a problem this big is too big for charity to solve alone. And so Jordan Casilo, who is an optometrist and our founder, established VisionSpring with the idea of, could we blend philanthropy with earned revenue in order to try to address the problem at a larger scale? So I'm delighted to share that we are 20 years old now. And we have now served our we have now served our 10 millionth customer with eyeglasses. That means that we have unlocked $2 billion worth of income earning potential for people living on less than $4 a day. And we feel like we're just getting started.
What is it that you've had to do differently, perhaps, to other organizations? Or what have you learned along the way that you think has been particularly transformational in VisionSpring's success?
I think for any social enterprise, what makes the difference between the social enterprise is ultimately trying to get into the root cause. So there's an unjust equilibrium that has maintained this status quo of people in low-income communities not having glasses, which means that there's a whole bunch of problems, both on the supply side and the demand side. And so the market is broken, and the market has failed to serve this particular segment. So as a social enterprise, the first thing is we have to be students of the ecosystem and students of the problem. And we have to be focused on the North Star at all times, which is how do we increase functioning, productivity, and income through vision correction. And then the business models that we choose and the methodologies, we need to be flexible. So we have iterated and evolved our models now multiple times. One of our longest running programs, called the Reading Glasses for Improved Livelihoods program, came out of a business in a bag model back in 2001, 2002, where we were training people with an 8th grade education to be able to do a basic visual acuity assessment, identify people who just had blurry vision called presbyopia. That blurry vision is just a function of old age. We need magnifying glasses. These are an over-the-counter product. You and I can walk into any chemist or bookshop or the train station and pick them up. But in the markets that we're talking about, whether it's India or Bangladesh or Nigeria, those glasses, those simple pair of magnifying reading glasses, are not available in communities. So we thought, how could we shift the task out of the walls of the hospital, out of the walls of a clinic, out of the hands of an optometrist, out into community more through community health workers and nurses and lay people, and then create a really important referral bridge so that those who have cataract or those who need prescription glasses can get pushed up into the higher level services. That model didn't quite work because it turned out that reading glasses, they're a slow-moving good. Community health workers had a limited geography that they could operate in, and she couldn't sustain her livelihood on glasses alone. So then we evolved the model, and in 2006, we added reading glasses into a bundle of goods and services, along with sanitary napkins and paracetamol and birth control and nutritional porridge, et cetera. And once reading glasses were added in as a margin positive item into a bundle of goods and services, that the community health worker could make a commission on that product along with other items, then it stuck. That program has now trained 26,000 community health workers. It has replicated from Bangladesh to Uganda to Zambia. We're about to take it to Malawi. We have screened 10 million people through that program, and 2 million people have purchased reading glasses, and they're purchasing those glasses for between 1 to 2 days' wages. People will pay for glasses. They will pay with their limited discretionary income for the immediate benefit of glasses. And the average income of those customers, they're living on $2.50 a day, but they will pay for the immediate benefit of glasses. And then, of course, we subsidize it, right? So what they can pay can't pay for the entire operation and the supply chain, et cetera. So I think one of the most important things about social enterprise is being a student of the customer, being a student of the ecosystem, and a student of the problem, and then being really willing to adapt the business models to fit. It's not just about the economics. A lot of people say, what are the barriers? And, it must be affordability. But the reality is social stigma and aspiration to want glasses is a barrier. So in some communities, 30% of the people think eyeglasses make your eyes weaker. In other communities, people think glasses are like braces. You can put them on and then you can take them off. Other people don't want their girls to be in glasses because it will make them less marriable and might increase their dowry. And there's just a lot of people who feel like it makes me old and I don't want to be old, and it doesn't matter what income segment we're in. We can all have a little bit of vanity about, the idea of like, am I going to have to wear my glasses?
How do you make that sustainable then? How does that having to work that much harder become something operationally sort of normal? Something that the business, can really, also build kind of resilience in, do you know what I mean? Because I think there's so many people who try but fail, but clearly something's working for you.
One of the things is determination. I mean, we will throw ourselves at the wall again and again and again until we get over it. So there is a bit of a sort of an organizational culture. The other one is as a core value is revealing hard truths. Is being clear when things aren't working and letting the data and evidence drive our decision making, right? And when things aren't working, we will move away from a model or we'll close it down. Let me put this in a little context because you brought up an important notion, the idea of sort of sustainability. And I think there's two things that people should know about VisionSpring. One is we are a nonprofit social enterprise, meaning we have earned revenue from the sale of glasses to mission-aligned organizations. So other people who do similar work to us, hospitals, government agencies, other NGOs, we provide a reliable, stable supply of low-cost, high-quality glasses. So that's a B2B part of our business. We are also B2C. So we are in communities doing vision screening. We're in schools, we're in workplaces, we're in transportation hubs, tea gardens, factories, et cetera. And in that context, there are different payers at scale. So the question as a social enterprise is, who is the payer at scale? And what's so interesting about glasses is, in the context of the B2B business, other institutions are payers at scale. But when you're B2C, is there a route to market? So if the end consumer is the eyeglasses wearer, they are the ultimate payer at scale. Ultimately, we end consumers, we want them to be able to have affordable glasses that they can acquire. But who are the other people who care about them? So if we think about employers, we have a very specific strategy into the garment, textile, and apparel and footwear space. So ultimately, if you take a country like Bangladesh, the garment sector is producing 87% of the country's export earnings. You've got pushing up to 4 million garment workers. It's a majority female workforce. And you've got factory owners who are the employers, and you have the upstream brands who care a lot about worker well-being and quality in their supply chains. If we start to think about who is the payer at scale, we open our mind up to who are the other people who want this to succeed. So eventually the worker can pay for glasses, but at the first instance, when we go into a factory, 78% of the factory workers are getting glasses for the first time in their life. So if we go into a factory, we find that 30 to 40% of the entire workforce needs glasses. And 78% of them are going to get glasses for the very first time because we have brought the vision screening as a workplace benefit. So the employer is paying, the factory can contribute, the brand like Levi, Target, Williams-Sonoma, we've got really great support from Warby Parker. They can help to pay. We have brought in USAID as a government agency who brings in matching funds. And so as a social enterprise, we're really pushed to think about what are the different kinds of revenue, who are the different kinds of payer, what is the role of philanthropy to get something started, and then what are the other revenues that can be brought to bear. The way that the Clear Vision Workplace program started in the factories was it was the brands who gave us seed capital and said, go try it in the factories and see if we can awaken the demand for this service, because people didn't know. Now that the factories know that there is a problem, the factories are now even approaching us to saying, hey, we know that we've got this issue. Can you help us? And they're willing now to put money on the table. And then we bring in other support from USAID and, for example, Warby Parker, that then helps to round out the bundle to cover all of the costs. But we went from screening 5,000 people in our first year, and this year, we're going to be screening over 125,000 factory workers.
This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible. But who are we?
Always Possible works with ambitious businesses, charities, and public services that are thinking about what's next.
From architects to aerospace companies, puppet theatres to primary schools, business networks to big data analysts.
If you're wanting to be brave with some big decisions, or to be clearer about what to prioritise, then an award-winning workshop from the Always Possible team is a brilliant starting point.
We care about just one thing: building ideas that work.
For creative, intuitive, and practical expertise, consider Always Possible as your strategic partner. Find out more about how we could power up your mission. Visit alwayspossible.co.uk.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
it's a complex business model, but I can see how that's evolved and how it works. But I can see how one of the perhaps criticisms you face, or generally big brands that are from the US, the UK, Northern Europe, that are doing extraordinary things with this sort of philanthropy commerce model, this true social enterprise. But I can see how there might be criticism of some kind of soft power, sort of white savior type thing. This idea of many NGOs have been accused of this. Sort of taking a Western, using a kind of colonial tool to go and try and support communities in different places. Now, the outcome is not that, but that charge could be leveled and has been, and sometimes it is done clumsily. We've seen companies do exactly that influence building through what looks like generosity. So now, how you counter that? What is it in your business model that kind of leans into that? Because I know you're doing something quite interesting.
Yeah, so you're really great to bring this up. The issues of the connection between foreign policy and international aid are ancient. The extraction mindset, we're going to give something small, but we're taking much more, is real. There's a huge push in the international development space around decolonizing international aid and making sure more funding is going into community-based organizations and organizations that have local leaders and local founders. I think there are two things that VisionSpring has been particularly focused on through our growth journey. One is to be customer-centric. And while the word customer could be a capitalist word, I think there's a really important element to the power dynamic when we stop using the word beneficiary. The trouble with the word beneficiary is somebody is benefiting, and it implies that there's a lack of agency and somebody is receiving a handout, and therefore there's some kind of level of gratitude that is owed to the giver. And when you have a customer orientation, it really changes that. As an organization, VisionSpring and our team members, we have to show up in community with a product and a service that is worth people's time, that they're going to leave their job for the day, or they're going to travel, or for, even if it's just for 20 minutes. So it's got to be worth their time, and it has to be worth their limited discretionary income, whether they're parting with 50 cents, $1, or $4. Well, the service that we are offering has to be knowledgeable. We have to earn trust. We have to be providing glasses that are stylish, and we need to offer the dignity of choice. We have to show up in community with products that are going to be durable because they are paying with their limited discretionary income, and the product needs to last 1 to 2 years. And we need to be able to, when we're there, it's important that we understand that the value proposition, and by coming with a customer orientation, the power is in the hands of the customer. First, they are the ones who are initiating the transaction with us. We are present, but they are the ones who are initiating the transaction. And so it changes the power dynamic, and it puts each one of us as VisionSpring team members in service to the customer rather than kind of coming in with a hero's mindset. It's a real psychological shift. There are other benefits to when people pay even a limited amount of money for something, which is they're more likely to wear the glasses, they're more likely to take care of them, clean them, etc. The other thing, though, that you talked about is this idea of influence. And I think when we come to influence, the question is, it comes to power dynamics, but then there's the question about, well, where's the money coming from? So if VisionSpring is 70% philanthropy and 30% earned revenue, we still have philanthropists. And so some people say, well, you could be turning to your donors, and are you a donor-facing organization? I think the trouble with a lot of nonprofits is we end up facing our donors and listening to our donors, and the donors are wagging the dog. The donors are setting the strategy. And I think what's been really powerful for VisionSpring is we have had a very clear strategy. We are very customer-oriented, and we have a phenomenal set of donors who mostly see themselves as venture philanthropists. They are backing our team, they are backing our strategy, and 70% of our funding is unrestricted, which means they are trusting our team and our track record, and they are investing in our vision. That is a really unique position to be in as an organization. And as a leader, it's a real privilege because it means that we get to experiment a lot and we get to push the frontier of our work a lot. But it also, it also means we engage with our donors in a particular way where we see them as investors. Our donors are not our customers. And then the final piece is if we think about organizational design and organizational structure and footprint. VisionSpring was founded out of the United States, but we have capped our global North team to 12 people. We are more than 300 people in country and in market. And we have decentralized our leadership. We have decentralized our management team. So, for example, there are lots of really creative things that people can do in their org design to be more proximate to customers. You know, our head of programs is in Ghana. Our global head of programs is in Ghana. Our global head of finance splits his time between India and the US. Our global head of procurement is in India, but serving the world. And so the question is, how do we leverage communication technology to have more virtual teams? And so org design and org structure matters a lot.
Yes, I mean, that puts I've got a team of 12 and that's all I have to manage. I certainly, it puts it into perspective. I couldn't have a leadership team all over the world. I think that's incredible. But the power of that and the learning, I keep coming back to learning, but I think there's something really important about big organizations or even small ones that are daring to do something different. And so, you know, with this distributed team that are in country that will be, as you talk about kind of localized, the insights you must be getting, the knowledge about culture change, about economics, about kind of social, I mean, some of the things you talked about earlier, you know, why do some people not wear glasses? You know, I'm sure your company will have far more knowledge about that, which is a really fundamental, you know, question that probably the only other people thinking about that might be some universities, you know. So having a kind of a business perspective, and I think is really interesting. So coming back to the question of influence, do you influence back up? You know, do you work with the UN? Are there opportunities for the knowledge you're gaining as a business to help advise on foreign policy, on international, aid decisions? Because that feels like that's quite a powerful potential two-way street there. You know, what extent is that possible with what you do?
The idea that you bring up about the market intelligence is really great because beneficiary is a bad word at VisionSpring. The US being the headquarters is both a bad word. We always say, like, we are not the head. You know, those of us who are in the US, we're the support team, you know, because the head, the intelligence of the organization is in community. It's with our customer facing teams because, as you say, they've got the insight. You know, that's where we understand what's happening. But it is really important working on a problem. So many social enterprises are working on problems that are just so big that none of us can solve them by ourselves. And so most of what we do on a day-to-day basis is deliver product and service in community, right? But it's really important that we use our know-how and our evidence to do two things. One is to catalyze collaborative action so we can bring many, many more partners together. And I'm a big believer that 1 + 1 = 11. Right now, we're working on a really big initiative in Assam for tea pickers, which is a vision-intensive job. And we're working with the Department of Labor. We're working with the Department of Tea Tribe Welfare, with microfinance organizations who finance into the tea estates. We're working with the value chain actors within the tea supply chain. And then, of course, we're working with other eye care organizations. So how do we catalyze collaborative action at a geographic and customer segment level? But then what you talked about is really important, which is the systems change work, which is how do we take our know-how and our evidence and influence? And the influence agenda is really around what can we do to create an environment where many models, many solutions for clear vision, whether it's delivered by government, whether it's delivered by the private sector, mission-driven organizations, they can all thrive. So VisionSpring is a founding member of a couple of coalitions. We are a founding member of the UN Friends of Vision, as well as the Coalition for Clear Vision. And the UN Friends of Vision is led by 3 ambassadors of the United Nations, the ambassador from Antigua and Barbuda, who himself is blind, Ambassador Webson, the ambassador from Ireland, and the ambassador from Bangladesh. And then there's 8 civil society organizations, we are among them, who support this effort. And so we've had some huge wins over the last years. It started in 2019 with the World Report on Vision that the World Health Organization put out for the very first time. Fast forward to 2021 when the United Nations voted on the very first resolution for eye health that recognized eye health as a driver of multiple sustainable development goals. And the governments adopted an agenda to include eye care in universal health coverage and in primary care. That led to then the development of baseline data, which basically showed that only 35% of the people in the world who need glasses have them. And in low-income countries, that number is well below 20% and is as low as 3%, meaning only 3% of the people or 15% of the people who need eyeglasses have them. And with data, we always say like what gets measured gets done. So once you've got some data, once we've got some baseline, we've got basically the starting line for the race. Is now how do we increase the effective coverage of refractive error with glasses as well as the coverage for cataracts? As recently as Monday, I had the opportunity to launch a policy brief with the International Labor Organization and the International Association for the Prevention of Blindness on how do we bring eyeglasses into workplaces globally. So VisionSpring's work in factories is what we can do by ourselves. But when we start working in coalition, we can start to influence thousands and thousands of factory or other workplace settings. I think a lot of social enterprises go through the journey of developing a product and service and a delivery model and a business model and delivering on that. And then you start running into all these barriers to scaling. And you can't solve those barriers by yourself. And so then you start looking to, well, who else cares about this problem and what do we do and how can we band together? So it's a really exciting moment for us in the eye care space because the level of collaboration is at new heights.
So what do the next 20 years look like? What are you excited about?
Well, the next 20 years, we're all going to be working together to solve the problem of uncorrected blurry vision by 2050. I mean, we are set on trying to do it in a generation. We think it's possible. Here's the reality. It's an affordable product. It's not complicated. We have the solution. We know how to do it. We know what the barriers are and how to knock those down. It's just a matter of then scaling it up. So the world needs 500,000 points of distribution for prescription glasses and 400,000 more points of distribution for reading glasses in order to have durable, lasting supply. So we have to awaken the demand, get the supply in place, and then we will be able to solve the problem globally.
Do you see a time where the technology, I guess, is there a time when glasses themselves or eyeglasses are extinct?
I mean, obviously, technology plays a huge role. So there's prevention, diagnosis, and curative, right? And so there's two things to know on the prevention front. I mean, myopia is exploding globally. 80% of children in Singapore are wearing glasses, 50% in China. The numbers in India have been moving from sort of 9% to close to 15%. If you're in sub-Saharan Africa, those numbers are still at 3 and 4%. But the confluence of lack of exposure to UV light, genetics, near vision work, screen time is driving myopia. And here's the thing about myopia. Myopia can get more severe if it is not corrected early. And severe myopia can then actually turn into blindness. So one of the things that the eye care community is really focused on is how do we focus more on prevention for myopia and early correction so that it doesn't get out of control. The other is on the diagnosis front. So the World Health Organization recommends that we need one optometrist per 10,000 population. In the United States, it's an optometrist per 6,000. In Bangladesh right now, it's an optometrist per 1 million. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's just not enough optometrists around. So there's a huge push right now on handheld refractive devices. So what are the different ways that we can get a correct prescription? How do we make that faster? And how can we have an optometrist supervise other people who are using devices to get us closer to accurate refraction? So the refraction technology is moving very quickly. When it comes to something like surgery, I mean, obviously there's LASIX. There has been a new eye drop for presbyopia, which will sort of help to
pull ththings into focus for a period of about 4 hours. I think for our customer segment, all of these things are very, very far away. If we can get to a point of customer directed acquisition of reading glasses in the next 10 years across all of these markets, that will be a massive success. If we can leverage telemedicine to get more of the tertiary care into more communities, that will be a huge win as well. And then, everyone always asks, like, what's the role of AI? There's actually just a report that came out in the Lancet that summarizes some of this, but we'll see what the applications are going to be for eye health, but certainly in medical education, it's going to be massive.
It does feel like we're coming out of the post-war capitalist years into something else, where there's a more joined up confluence of social, sustainable, environmental reforms. We're not there yet. There's still a long way to go, but you've got such clarity about the change that you're making through this model, which is admirable. A lot of other people I've spoken to are still working that out. Are you an optimist, or do you feel that organizations like yours still stick out?
I think any of us who are in social enterprises, we're sort of stubborn optimists, But we have good days and bad days, don't we? There's some days we think, oh my goodness, really? Like, are we back in 1993? Like, what's going on? But there are other moments where you really can feel the shift. So there are a couple interesting things that I think have happened. As recently as this year, there was a resolution at the UN that recognized social entrepreneurship and cooperative economic models as key for the Sustainable Development Goals, especially Sustainable Development Goal number 1 on no poverty, and number 8 on economic growth and inclusion, and then related to the climate goals, right? So it's looking at the power of cooperatives and self-help groups, as well as social enterprises. And I think there's this validation that there are so many other different ways to generate value that's not just profit. And so there is a shift. Like, what is value, right? Is it just monetary? Or are there other kinds of well-being or other kinds of benefits that are being created and generated and exchanged? And what are the different ways to do that? I do find that more young people are interested in social enterprise than ever before. If you look at what's going on in the business schools, there's so much hunger and demand in a traditional MBA program for courses on social entrepreneurship, and to question traditional capitalist structures, and to think about the ways that business solutions can be brought to bear on social problems, and the way that businesses can execute with a lighter footprint in terms of the damage that we're doing to our planet. I mean, the climate crisis, I think, has created an urgency and an underlying angst in so many of us that says, if not now, then when? And will we be is this the generation where we can pick up this mantle? So I think you're right. The trouble is, it's like turning freight trains. You can't just like turn the steering wheel. You got to relay the entire track and change systems, and that takes a long time. And so I do think the danger of the international development, philanthropy, ESG space is that our talk can be way ahead of our action. There can be a lot of talk, and the action and the money can be slow. I get frustrated when the talk and the action are far apart. But everything starts with intention, right? And I think we're seeing more positive intention than ever.
And as you said earlier, and I'm possibly paraphrasing here, but this idea of, if you don't measure it, it doesn't happen. That feels where a lot of the change is. ESG, good and bad things to it. It's more sort of compliance-led, perhaps, rather than other things. But what it's doing is forcing companies, or encouraging companies, to put a number against what progress looks like.
That's right. And those commitments matter. They matter a lot. And again, this goes back to the power dynamics. I mean, traditionally, charities, we've kind of been approached philanthropists or companies with our tin cup, and said, pretty please, can you fund our work? And I think a lot of us are standing very grounded in the knowledge that we have, the value that we create, and we're quite clear about the value that we can actually offer companies in terms of what we can help them to deliver and achieve in community. What can be really great is when philanthropists and corporations and CSR departments, et cetera, can come around a table and be students of the problem together. When we are all students of the problem, now we are all equals, and now we are all in a position to co-create solutions, and everybody can bring their unique superpower and their resources and their attributes and at that problem. And we get out of this sort of one directional, the corporate is giving to the nonprofit and the nonprofit is executing. And instead we're partners in solving the problem. And you know who's really got to be at the table is the customers and the community and the people who are affected, because, they're the ones who are experiencing the issue every single day. So I hope that kind of dialogue will also drive new solutions and new ways of doing things.
Thank you so much, Ella, for being on the Possibility Club. And we'll put all of the details of VisionSpring and the work you're doing in the show notes, so listeners can go and explore for themselves. But all power to you. I think it's a great mission.
Richard, appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Possibility Club, Practical Bravery. If you enjoyed this episode, do like, share, review, tell everybody about it. Look in the show notes for all the details of today's guest, stuff we talked about, stuff that's of interest, new things to read, new things to listen to. And if you are running a business or a charity and you are trying to accelerate or improve the impact that you have in the world, if you want to be famous for what you do and what you change rather than just what you sell, then talk to us. alwayspossible.co.uk. We want to hear from you, we want to talk to you, we want to amplify and elevate your ideas, and who knows, we might be able to help you feel more confident and clear about what's next. alwayspossible.co.uk. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new special guest and a new insight on practical bravery in action.
The Possibility Club is an Always Possible podcast. The interviewer was Richard Freeman for Always Possible, and the producer and editor was me, Chris Thorpe Tracy, for Lo-Fi Arts. Have a good week.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Lo-Fi Arts.